Okay, first I want to make you aware of our non-discrimination policy statement. Caltrans will make every effort to ensure non-discrimination in all of its services, programs, and activities, whether they are federally funded or not, and that services and benefits are fairly distributed to all people regardless of race, color, or national origin. And for more information on Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 at Caltrans, please visit our website and we will put that link in the chat box. And now let's take a quick look at our agenda. Today's meeting is scheduled for 90 minutes in which we will hear about the following. First, our Caltrans Federal Liaison will share some welcoming remarks. Then we will hear from the Caltrans Office of Strategic Investment Planning on partnership opportunities with Caltrans. Then we will hear from 3 successful federal grant applications before next steps and closing out the session. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Nicole Longoria, our Caltrans Federal Liaison, to kick off this Federal Grants 101 webinar series.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Longoria, Federal Liaison of the California Department of Transportation. Welcome to Caltrans' Federal 101 webinar series. Thank you so much for being here today. We have over 600 people registered, so I'm so delighted that there is such a great interest in this topic. I hope you'll find this webinar helpful and will attend our future webinars that Vanessa will go over a little bit later in the agenda. So today's webinar focuses on partnerships and how to create competitive federal grant applications, which includes us learning directly from successful applicants. This webinar is part of our overall enhanced outreach and technical assistance effort that we're providing for you, our partners, to promptly communicate anticipated and active federal grant funding opportunities, partnership opportunities, resources, and tools that will hopefully result in competitive grant applications and successful discretionary grant awards. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to provide just a little bit of background of where most of our federal discretionary funding opportunities come from. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as IIJA, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was signed into law by President Biden on November 15, 2021. The law authorizes $1.2 trillion over 5 years for transportation and infrastructure, with $550 billion of the funding going toward new investments and programs. The bill also provides a significant amount of funding through a wide range of competitive grant programs. Next slide, please. So since IIJA was enacted, California has received approximately $42.1 billion in formula and competitive funding. Of this amount, California agencies have been awarded over $9 billion for transportation-related discretionary grant programs for over 600 projects, which represents about 16% of the national total. So this robust infrastructure investment is giving Caltrans and you, our local partners, the tools we need to support critical transportation projects throughout the state. So although we're doing very well in this space, we can do better. There are still many funding opportunities coming down the pike, so I'm happy to see so many of our California partners represented here today and interested in applying for federal competitive grants. And lastly, I want to take just a moment to express my gratitude to today's speakers. They're sharing their successful federal grant applications and best practices with us all. With that, we have a very full agenda, so I'm going to turn it back over to Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And our next speaker is Gustavo Alfaro with the Caltrans Office of Strategic Investment Planning, and he will talk about partnership opportunities with Caltrans.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gus Alfaro. I'm the Acting Office Chief for the Office of Strategic Investment Planning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I know there's many folks on the line that have a ton of experience, and we have some amazing speakers with also experience. And so just a little bit about me. I've worked 16 years in state service, most of those years at Caltrans, and I've evaluated hundreds of projects. I feel like I look at projects every day, and I've supported grant development. I myself have written a successful grant application in partnership with my colleagues in the districts and with partners across the state. So I'm a huge advocate for partnerships and collaborations to tackle the many difficult challenges impacting our communities and regions. And I always like to show this slide because it really shows, for the transportation system, we have so much to think about, right? The economy, climate change, safety for bikes and pedestrians, making our communities walkable, zero emission vehicle charging station development. There's so many different things. And my office in particular, if you're not familiar with it, we are identifying project priorities, funding needs. We're nominating projects for discretionary grant programs, and we're trying to put our best foot forward to successfully obtain grant funding. And I can tell you, and all of the speakers here today are going to tell you in their experience, the best and most effective way is through partnerships. So with that said, we all know no one achieves success alone. And so that's going to be the heart of what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. This particular presentation that I'm going to give, I'm really going to focus on how we define partnerships, what are the benefits, and deciding the best time to partner. And then I'm also going to talk about Caltrans resources that you can walk away from and build those relationships, because that's
Hey,
what partnership
Gus.
is. Yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but your slides are not showing.
Oh, I apologize for that. Thank you. So let me go back real quick. And again, these are some of the different issues that all of us are trying to address, whether it's economy or climate or zero emission infrastructure or improving our communities, making them more walkable. And then this is that quote I just mentioned a moment ago. Apologize for not showing my screen. We don't achieve success alone. So I'm going to talk about defining partnerships, benefits, and deciding the best time to partner in Caltrans resources. So how do we define partnership? Partnership is a collaborative effort between two or more parties that have a vested interest. And I want to, again, emphasize collaborative and vested interest, because let's be honest, if we don't have a vested interest, or you don't have a vested interest, we're not going to work together. And we should find those places where we do have priorities that meet. And so some of the different forms of partnerships include local plan collaboration. I love this work. I think this is super important. Doing public engagement together, walking the streets together, talking about conceptual ideas. I think it's generally not the best idea to do this alone. It's better for us to talk together about these ideas to determine, what's feasible, what makes sense, what possibly could be funded and how. Cost sharing, that's a huge, part of partnership is, who has, skin in the game, right? Local match, charters. If you need to have a charter, you don't have to have one, but sometimes it's helpful to identify roles and responsibilities. And then joint applications. You're going to hear today from folks with a lot of experience that will tell you putting together an application is difficult, and it takes a team. It takes a team, not just within Caltrans, but with our partners. So that's definitely a part of partnership. And then letters of support, that's just a verbal or a written way of us saying, we're on the same page, we're a team. So why are partnerships important? Well, the truth is that discretionary grant programs value partnership. Sometimes they even set aside funding for partnerships. And the reason why the decision makers call that out is because it communicates confidence in the project delivery, financial completeness, community buy-in, and local coordination. And it helps to reduce project risk. So if I'm a decision maker at USDOT and I'm trying to decide which project to award, and I have one that has the whole community is buying in, you got nonprofits, you got your city, your county, everyone's on board, that's the project you could put your arm around, as opposed to a project that doesn't have any of that. So that's why time and time again, the partnerships are really leading to successfully awarded projects. When do we partner? So I get asked this question a lot. I did years ago when I was in the district. Earlier the better. Start at the planning stage when needs are being identified. You've got a local plan you're developing, that's the time to start partnering and to start talking pre-PID, pre-project initiation. figure out together where priorities intersect for the state highway system and local roads, strategize on future potential competitive funding programs. I wrote here, create roadmaps, because our projects are like destinations, right? How do we get to that destination? And if we sit there and really put our heads together and put together roadmaps for the scope, the schedule, the funding, then we're going to be successful. And part of that success is going to need to start with bringing awareness to Caltrans. Have conversations about community challenge, concepts, and priorities. Invite each other to coffee to listen, learn, and share challenges and solutions. I'll just tell you real quickly, like I had a partner agency, a transit agency, pull me aside and said, "Hey, can I buy you coffee?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love that." And we had the best conversation. I learned so much, and it helped to improve our relations and also my relations with others. So I think that that's a small thing, but it's a big thing, right? Because it's about establishing those relationships. And in part of those discussions, we're raising attention about community health needs, economic issues, and project benefits and solutions. And essentially, we're working towards identifying viable grant opportunities to help get these projects delivered. I want to leave you guys with some Caltrans resources because I want to start having more and more conversations with many of you. I want, the districts as well. We all want to build great partnerships. So if you go to the OSIP website, the Strategic Investment Planning website, you'll find links to major federal and state discretionary programs. You'll find templates for letters of support, Caltrans project nomination calls for projects that we'll put on there, policy and planning documents affecting Caltrans strategic investment strategy. If you're not familiar with that, please go to the website and read about it because it does impact the types of projects we want to partner, the types of projects we support. We also have our contacts and district office representatives. I want to throw a shout out to the district investment planning managers. These are incredible people with a lot of experience that I rely on and rely on me. So they're your first point of contact. They live in your communities, they live in your region. Please reach out to them. And I just want to say, moving forward, we hope to be in the district, supporting all of you, actually going out and looking at your project sites and evaluating those, not just from headquarters, but also in your own backyard. So hopefully we could start having more in-person meetings and meeting all you folks and learning more about your projects. I'll stop there and say thank you. And here's my contact information. I really appreciate the time and I wish you all success in developing partnerships. Thank you.
And are there any questions for Gus?
Looking at, I don't see any hands raised and I don't see any questions in the chat.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all and take care.
Thank you, Gus. That was really helpful, and especially learning about partnership opportunities and also for providing your office's website. That's really, really helpful. And let's jump to our next agenda item. Our next speakers are Andrew Quinn with Caltrans Roadway Pricing and Sabrina Bradbury with the California Association of Council of Governments. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Vanessa, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. So as Vanessa mentioned, my name is Andrew Quinn. I'm Assistant Deputy Director for Roadway Pricing at Caltrans headquarters in the Planning and Modal program. And my role is really about helping set overall vision and policy for roadway pricing across the state of California. And we submitted a grant application to the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program in partnership with CalCog and a number of MPOs in California. Before I begin the presentation, I'll just quickly hand it over to Sabrina to introduce herself.
Thanks, Andrew. Sabrina Bradbury here from CalCog. I'm the Director of Government Affairs and happy to talk about the partnership with Caltrans and some of our members on this grant.
All right. So what is the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program, or RIA? It's a program funded by USDOT, which seeks to fund technical and financial assistance for qualified entities, including state DOTs, and then a number of other organizations. So this is it's a pretty open-ended grant program. Funding is intended to build capacity and to provide external technical assistance to help evaluate, structure, and then deliver complex transportation projects and improve their competitiveness for federal funding and financing. The goal is to improve our ability, or any grantee's ability, to officially translate overarching goals and planning documents into a pipeline of actual projects, and then ultimately to deliver those projects, and in our case, to improve transportation infrastructure for Californians. There's some very unique things about this grant program. So there is no state or local match required. It's not required. It's not included as part of the evaluation. So it's can be all federal funding. As I mentioned, yeah, the application criteria ignores local funding or in-kind contributions. We applied for $4 million over 2 years. USDOT requested us to reduce that to $2 million because they had a lot of interest in this program in the last round, and we obliged that request. But just wanted to mention that as an example. Sometimes there's post-application negotiations with the federal funding agencies. There are really minimal reporting requirements for this program, so they really have designed it to allow for grantees to really focus on getting the work done, and there are no long-term commitments. And then USDOT provides additional technical assistance outside of the grant funding during the grant period. What was our proposal? So in conjunction with CalCog and the MPOs, Caltrans applied to establish the California Transportation Choices Partnership to enhance the multimodal transportation network supported by equitable road pricing. We're aiming to build a coalition of state, regional, and local agencies that understand and can communicate the costs and benefits of equitable road pricing. And the idea is to develop a business plan and then a roadmap for broader and more consistent process statewide for advancing these types of projects that will help achieve public benefit. Some of the outputs and outcomes. So on the output side, we're planning on holding pricing leadership academies where governmental officials and staff would be invited, and community-based and NGO staff would be invited as well to really better understand pricing. We're going to conduct some polls and focus groups. We want to develop a communication toolkit, again, that will aid governments and partners in communicating the costs and benefits of pricing projects. We'll also develop a pricing toolkit, which gives folks sort of a set of options, if you will, of different types of pricing strategies to implement in a given corridor or area. And then there'll be multiple reports which summarize the overall activities, discuss equity outcomes of pricing, and best practices in building coalitions around pricing. Some of the outcomes include things like stronger and more sustainable partnerships and alignment between Caltrans and our many regional and local partners in California on pricing. California is somewhat unique in that regional and local agencies are very significantly involved in pricing, whether that's a toll agency or an MPO that is also a toll agency, or a transit agency that can often also be a toll agency. Hopefully we'll be able to implement equitable pricing strategies that help improve the lives of those from low income and disadvantaged communities. Now, ultimately, this will help contribute to reduce congestion and traffic and emissions, so improving again, the transportation system in California and our overall quality of life. I'll turn it over to Sabrina for the next few slides.
Thanks, Andrew. So first, I just want to say that partnership building should begin much before you're thinking about applying for a grant. And I think Gus really articulated that well. It's about relationship building and getting to know who all your different partners and stakeholders are, because you don't know when an opportunity, a grant program might roll out and it might spark an idea that you get because you had those conversations with other partners, right? It's that listening and learning part of it. And so, yes, a lot of these programs are now, annual for the next few years. But again, just knowing kind of what your partners are working on, and it allows you to then think about who might already be interested in a project or program idea that you have. So in the case of Andrew, he knew that there were some of the largest NPOs in the state who were already working on pricing. And in fact, 3 of our members in the Sacramento, San Diego, and Southern California regions already had a grant that they were awarded from Caltrans, a sustainable planning grant, to develop a framework for pricing pilots in their regions. So we were able to really leverage those existing partnerships when Andrew had this idea for this grant. And I also just wanted to point out that nonprofits and community-based organizations in particular can be really strong partners, not only because you're engaging with a local entity, particularly when it is a community-based organization, right? That you're talking to the community themselves about what their needs are, but also as CalCog, while we're not a community-based organization, we are a small nonprofit and therefore can be very nimble in being able to come together get our members together quickly for coordination on a grant like this. And really just want to emphasize too that sometimes we think about community-based organizations and nonprofits as partners that might want to submit a letter of support, but you should approach them early because they might actually have something that they can bring in terms of doing some of the work itself and being able to leverage their expertise. Next slide, Andrew. So some of the keys to grant writing coordination, I think it's really important to identify a lead writer and coordinator. Andrew was that person for our joint grant application. He, put forward the idea. We set up scheduled some calls to see if there was a there with some of our members. But then he was really the one that was helping make sure we met deadlines and kept talking to each other to move the ball forward. I also assisted with that. If there was a member who, needed a reminder like, hey, do you have any more edits to this application before we submit it? And I was also able to create a shared link on SharePoint so that everyone could edit one single document and we weren't dealing with version control. So I think all of that, particularly when the grant turnaround is tight, as it was about a 30-day period that we had to turn around a grant application, having someone who can get it started and really take the lead on writing, and then have the ability for other partners to just weigh in on, does this sound right? And make some comments and edits to add to it. And then final slide, some tips and best practices. I'm not sure how I feel about telling through the 300 plus people that are listening right now our secret sauce, because now you're all going to be more competitive, but know your audience. What are the priorities of the administration? Whether that's a state grant or a federal grant, right? Think about who's in leadership and what are the types of projects that they want to fund. They care about equity, climate, safety. Make sure you're also tying it to the specific grant program itself, because some of them, right, have different goals. But you really want to try and hit on as many of those as possible and tell a story when you're doing it, not just here are the bullet points of how this project or program meets the goals and objectives of the grant criteria, but really talk about how is this going to affect the broader corridor or community. In our case, it's a statewide partnership that we're trying to build here. And we had to articulate the need for the coordination with all these different regional entities and Caltrans, because as Andrew mentioned, there is this role where a lot happens at the local level and regional level that needs to tie up into the state efforts. And then unique letters of support, I think, are really important. It's great to have a template. You should definitely send that out to folks to have something to get started, but encourage them to articulate why it's uniquely important to them. And once you've submitted the application, having those partners send emails and make calls to USDOT or EPIC, whoever's managing the application process, to continue to advocate the importance, because sometimes there are grants that are all sort of high scoring, and so it can come down to showing that community support for the project or program. And with that, I will stop talking, and there's our contact information, and happy to take any questions.
There are a couple questions in the chat. The first one being, are local jurisdictions, cities and counties eligible for RIA?
Yes, definitely. I can actually pull up the list of eligibilities if you give me a minute, but it's a pretty open-ended program. While I'm looking that up, we can take another question.
Yeah, so there's another question in the chat. They asked, does RIA only do grants for roads?
No, so that's easy. They do grants for really any type of transportation infrastructure. So could be a road, could be a rail project, could be a transit project. It could possibly even be a port project. I think some ports have actually gotten awards under this program. So it's very open-ended in that sense. Let's see.
And those are all the questions in the chat for right now.
Okay.
Right, and I don't see any hands raised, so I don't have anybody asking a question. So that might be all the questions right now, but there might be some time at the end as well. So I'll hand it back to Vanessa.
I'll respond to the eligible entities question in the chat so we can keep moving.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sabrina and Andrew, for sharing your experiences of creating the successful cross-agency team. Really great to hear about all of that. Okay, and I'm gonna share my screen again. Just 1 second. Okay, next up we have Stephen Luther with the Humboldt County Association of Governments.
Hi, good morning. I'm Stephen. I'm the Associate Planner for the Humboldt County Association of Governments. It's a pleasure to be up here on this panel, and I'm excited to share the process for how HCOG was awarded our fiscal year 2023 U.S. Department of Transportation Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Next slide, please, Vanessa. So I wanted to start by sharing a bit of my personal story that led up to submitting this application. First, I wanted to acknowledge the seriousness of the traffic safety crisis and how challenging it can feel to be in a position working towards a vision of zero traffic deaths and serious fatalities. Even though we know there are solutions and that any traffic deaths are unacceptable, we still see a steady stream of grim media reports, and we have the data to back it. But at the same time, I think we're seeing this challenge met by a lot of people who are passionate about creating safer communities and who are stepping up to take action. And so there is plenty to be inspired by. In the city of Eureka, the former mayor, Susan Seaman, took a leadership stance by taking the initiative to form a broad-based, multi-jurisdictional traffic safety task force after a string of pedestrian fatalities in December 2020. The task force created the Go Slow, Watch the Road campaign, which you see on the right, and these signs are still seen up in yards around the county today. Around that same time, I was enrolled in a Leadership Redwood Coast program where Mayor Seaman gave an address speaking on how to approach the variety of intractable challenges that face rural communities. She asked the rhetorical question, if not you, then who? And that really resonated with me as I was thinking about our region's traffic safety crisis and how I could fit in. Because the Vision Zero work spans many disciplines, from policy to engineering to emergency response, I was finding it tough to find a place to fit in as a regional planning agency and to really add to the work already being done. But I realized that in my position as associate planner, I could apply for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant to fund a regional Vision Zero action plan. And our executive director, Beth Burks, fortunately agreed, and we decided to go for it in April 2023. The SS Spray is also appealing to HCOG because it is intended to be accessible to rural agencies who don't have a lot of experience with federal grants. And as a newer grant writer myself, who took the lead on this application, I can attest to the fact that it is doable. I know that staff capacity can be tough when considering whether to go after federal grants, but the application legwork for SS4A is fairly minimal, for instance, requiring just a 2-page narrative. And with a considerable portion of the funds set aside for planning as opposed to implementation and infrastructure, there are pretty good odds, which is encouraging. And looking at the most recent NOFO, about $461 million is available just for the planning and demonstration. So there is a good chance of success. Next slide, please. And speaking of the funding available, HCOG applied for and received a fairly large grant award of $480,000 for a planning and demonstration grant. There is a 20% match for this program, which I will describe in more detail how we arrived at that match. Just to provide a wider context for our project, here is a map of the county of Humboldt. The aerial map on the left showing the county boundary, all 3,500 square miles of land area, and the colored lines indicating the major arterials and highways. In total, there are 1,400 miles of road between the 7 incorporated cities, the unincorporated county, and tribal lands, plus 378 miles of state highway. We have a diverse geography ranging from isolated mountain communities to urban core areas, like in the city of Eureka, that has a population of 27,000. This geography also leads to a wide variety of safety issues, from solo vehicle road departures to impaired driving to a lack of infrastructure to protect vulnerable road users. The image on the right is a heat map of the county from the Berkeley Safe Trek Transportation Injury Mapping System, and you can see the concentration of fatalities within the greater Eureka area. Much of those accidents occur on Broadway and 4th Streets, which is where the US 101 highway runs through Eureka. And we know that this is one of our region's high injury networks that will be analyzed further in the action plan. Next slide. So I've described the need in narrative terms, and here's the data required in the program application to support that. Using the fatality analysis reporting system, the Humboldt County average annual traffic fatality rate is 18 people per 100,000. And then using the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer, 63% of the county is in a disadvantaged area. And those are two of the main metrics that are used to assess these applications. I will also point out the US DOT site for SS4A has instructions on how to generate these figures that I found very helpful to reference while preparing the application. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of those resources. Next slide. And speaking of, when I was researching for this presentation, I found a new resource, which is an Excel table showing kind of pre-selected high fatality rate areas that is published by the DOT. And just zooming in on the ones in California, if you see your county or city on this list and you haven't yet been awarded a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant or submitted an application this round, I think it's a good sign that you should apply for this round. Next slide, please. So moving on to how we went about forming our partnerships and the process for the grant. We work closely at HCOG with our Technical Advisory Committee, our standing committee, which is comprised of city engineers and public works officials, including representatives from our tribal governments. The TAC was enthusiastic about pursuing a regional Vision Zero action plan, and they felt like the plan would be more comprehensive than the local road safety plans that they have in their jurisdictions, which are more siloed, and they felt like the regional plan could result in recommendations for safety countermeasures that could be beneficial across jurisdictions, and then make a more competitive application for future infrastructure projects that could bundle all those measures together. There was an ad hoc committee that met 3 times to help prepare the application, which was very helpful for me to get guidance from more experienced practitioners and kind of set the outline for the grant program. Our County Public Works Director, Tom Matson, encouraged us to aim high in the grant award amount that we were going for, which is one of the reasons how we ended up at the $480,000 figure. And then also through our TAC, we sent out template support letters to all of our jurisdictions that included a line to pledge a commitment for in-kind staff support. And I did present to several city councils to make the case for why their small city would benefit from this program. And ultimately, we were able to get buy-in from all of our jurisdictions, ranging from $2,500 in-kind support from the smaller cities up to $20,000 from the county. And then on top of that, HCOG pledged staff hours as in-kind support, plus a $30,000 cash contribution. We also realized that having the demonstration events as part of the application helped us meet our local match, because that involved staff time to conduct outreach and set up the roads and the demo projects, and also to provide materials for those. So that helped us meet our match. We also were able to connect with our public health department to provide outreach to people experiencing homelessness. And we felt this is an important group to include because of the challenges involved in accessing services and encampments that are adjacent to roads with dangerous designs. And then another part of the process I wanted to mention is coordinating with the Trinidad Rancheria. They had received a Safe Streets and Roads for All award in 2022. And just to be aware, if another jurisdiction does have a plan in development, the FHWA will reach out to ask you to confirm coordination and to explain how there is no duplication of efforts. And then the picture on the right is the Carson Mansion in downtown Eureka. Next slide, please. So looking closer at the elements of the project here in Humboldt County, the bulk of it will consist of developing a comprehensive safety action plan. A consultant team will be responsible for conducting a thorough crash analysis and developing concept designs for priority implementation projects. Our application did state that we would have 12 pop-up demonstrations to enable us to reach rural communities as well as all the cities. But at this stage, we do not have specific projects. We plan to convene a steering committee that will help guide the process and select projects and locations. We're also revising the budget slightly for the demonstration project component to allow for more flexibility for jurisdictions to pursue more intermediate quick build type projects. And along with all these projects, there will be an emphasis on public education and robust community engagement. The TAC was excited about purchasing traffic safety cameras that can be installed on intersections to analyze traffic movements. This grant does allow us this type of purchase so long as the results from it are used to inform the action plan. So we'll be allowing each jurisdiction to use the camera for like a month at a time at key problem intersections, and then using that data to inform recommendations in the plan. Another element is supporting a nonprofit to conduct outreach for the Street Story tool that will empower people to self-report near misses. And then lastly, the project includes development of a public-facing Vision Zero data dashboard, which will serve as a landing page and introduction for the public to follow planning and progress toward reducing traffic fatalities. And pictured here is a section of Broadway with a biker crossing the 4 lanes of traffic. Next slide, please. And then these are just some local examples of recent pop-up demonstrations and infrastructure enhancements. The pop-up on the left lasted for 2 days and was able to demo a buffered bike lane for 50 participants using temporary materials. And then on the right, the city of Blue Lake created a mini roundabout to test out the concept on a local road. And then below that is pictured a recently completed lane reduction and addition of a buffered bike lane in Eureka. So our grant allows the flexibility to kind of do these temporary pop-ups to provide, example of the type of infrastructure that can be installed and serve as an education event for people. But we also want to allow the flexibility for jurisdictions to do slightly more longer lasting, like in the range of a month to 3 month quick build type projects. And then we'll conduct public engagement and get feedback, and those results will inform our action plan. Next slide, please. So just to conclude, I would encourage, especially for rural and small agencies, to go ahead and apply for the Safe Streets and Roads for All. I have heard that there's to expect a lot of paperwork with federal grants. So far, it's just been a steady stream of webinars, and definitely leaning into the partnerships with local jurisdictions, like you've heard some of the other speakers mention. And a final tip, you may have heard to get started on your federal UEI number soon. I will say don't be so eager to get started on that you muddy up the process because you miss the fact that your organization has an existing one from years ago. So you definitely learn from experience. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the next slide has my contact info. Thank you.
So there is one question in the chat so far. Oh, sorry, a couple. The first one is, can you give examples of grants that you have provided?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. It says, can you give examples of grants that you have provided?
Examples of grants that I have provided. I'm not sure what that is asking exactly. I would direct people to the Safe Streets and Roads for All webpage. They have a lot of resources there for anybody interested in applying. And you can see all the successful awards across the nation and some other examples of what projects people have gone for. And I can put that link in the chat there.
Perfect. While you do that, we do have a second question. They say, can you elaborate on the demonstration events hosted before the grant submittal?
Sure, yeah. So the pop-up demonstration was in McKinleyville, and that was part of a planning project to look at multimodal connections. So that one lasted for 2 days and was a collaboration with the consultant team from Mark Thomas and the County of Humboldt, as well as a local organization to, provide using straw bales like you saw and just traffic cones and chalk, a kind of model of what a buffered bike lane would look like at a key intersection where they're looking at some upzoning and additional housing. So people were able to, attend that and try it out and on paper add, their comments and thoughts about their level of comfort, if they thought it was a good idea, and all those comments were then included in the plan.
Perfect. And then the last question is, did you have any experience with implementation grant from Safe Streets for All?
I do not have any experience with the implementation grant side of it. I've just seen from various awards that some of them can be quite high in terms of the dollar amount, and there can be some very ambitious projects. Hopefully, we'll be following completion of our action plan, potentially pursuing an infrastructure grant application to implement.
Okay, perfect. Those are all the questions I see in the chat for right now. But if anyone else has further questions, I will be collecting them for the end. Sorry, there's one more. Can you speak to the grant agreement process?
I can a little bit, yeah. I'm currently in that process and completing the template grant agreement that we received, and yet to be determined kind of how much back and forth there is. But again, there have been, several webinars leading up to that grant agreement and explaining the process. And we also have an FHWA state representative who is available for any questions. So far, it seems to be going well.
And then, sorry, another question. When was the grant awarded to you?
Sure. So we turned in the application in July 2023, and then we're notified, I believe, in December.
Okay, perfect. Those are all the questions I see in the chat as of right now.
Yeah, moving over to the hand raise, I do have somebody has a question for you, Stephen. Roger, I'm going to unmute you, Roger, and then if you could just state your name and your agency.
And Roger, we are not able to hear you. A pop-up screen should have opened up on your end, asking you to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Greenway and Vanessa. Can you hear me now? My name is Roger. I'm from East Palo Alto. Great. The question I have is that how does a community that face marginalization, disparity, deal with the vicious cycle of grants where you require data in order to get the grants, but you don't have the money in order to get the data? So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand the question, and yeah, just the capacity issue. Again, I will say for this grant in particular, there are a lot of data resources. Accessing the FARS data is fairly simple, as well as using the US DOT Equity Explorer. So there are definitely tools out there. It can take a little bit of time to learn where they are and learn how to access them. But there are tools that are, in particular focusing on those marginalized or disadvantaged communities. And, oftentimes those metrics are part of the grant application and can be used to support your case for why you need the grant funds.
Okay, that's a great point, Stephen. Were you able to tell me more about to add in? Is there anything else grantees should know if if they're in a disadvantaged community? This is this something that the grantors are moving toward and prioritizing? And I see a lot of agencies that they have more points added for that.
Yeah, I again just speaking on this area for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, they do recognize the disproportionate effect that traffic fatalities have on disadvantaged communities, and recognizing that they have tried to make the application process accessible to smaller agencies like mine, and they do also take into account that data, I think, in selecting grant awards. So if you're concerned about that, I'd encourage you to look at the available data resources for East Palo Alto and to consider putting in an application. I think they strongly support those equity applications.
Okay, got it. That's what I want to know, because I get a little because we're in a really kind of strange situation where we're located one of the most wealthiest cities across the country, but we also have one of the most marginalization and disparity in the disadvantaged community. So sometimes the data for benefit cost analysis that is used from grantor could be skewed because the property value is like probably really high, millions of dollars, but doesn't take into consideration that the spending values of the residents and the long-term residents. So that's something I just want to bring up. Like what happened when that what happens? You guys, does the grantor make an exception of how they assess the usually like their assessment kind of chart or the BCA?
I'm not sure about that specifically. I'm happy to continue the conversation offline if my email is there, and yeah, I'd be happy to help you look into that.
Okay, all right, thank you so much, Stephen, and sorry for taking more time than normal for this question. Just I thought maybe thought want her to ask, but got a lot more than I got before I came in, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
All right, thanks, Roger. And I think we'll have more resources that we can speak on at the end with Vanessa to provide you, Roger, and thank you, Stephen. I don't see anything else, and I think we're getting close to our time for our next speaker, so I'll hand it back to Vanessa.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing with us how rural and smaller agencies are able to successfully apply for federal grants. That's really great to see that they can also take advantage of that. Okay, our last speaker is Benjamin Brissett with Caltrans Innovation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and we can go ahead and get started. So as Vanessa said, my name is Ben Brissett. I am the Innovation Branch Chief here at Caltrans, and I'm going to be spending some time today to talk about our recent successful grant application for the Southern California Mobility Wallet, some lessons learned from that application process, and some tips and tricks for moving forward. The Southern California Mobility Wallet, very broadly, is a project that is going to deploy global standards for digital payments to transit and highway services here in LA County with the goal of improving mobility, equity, and safety for everyone across the system. So an easier way to think about this is if you go through a toll road now, anywhere in the state, there's the automatic transponders. You have an account, it charges you, and it's just coming up with a more streamlined and efficient way of being able to do that, where the way you're charged for a toll, the way you're charged for a transit fare are one integrated system, with the end goal of encouraging people to use transit more because it is easier from the payment side of things. This project will also have a component where it establishes somewhat of a incentive for people to take transit by allocating some of the funds for whatever road charge or toll or express lane charge they use. Because it is one integrated account, there is the ability to essentially say, okay, well, you paid $3, to drive in the toll road this morning, and now we're going to give you $1 back to encourage you to go take a ride on the bus. So you're not essentially continuing to pay separately, and it is a financial tool to essentially convince you to take transit because you've already paid. As I've been talking, I think, it's become clear that this is very much a conceptual project. So this is something that we are trying out. It is something that we have not done before. There are components to it. We already have toll roads, as Andrew mentioned earlier, that we are developing a separate road charging strategy. We did this down here in LA County. LA Metro has a robust fare collection system for buses and trains. They also have their own sort of pilot to provide money for low income and underserved riders to encourage them to use transit more and reduce the financial burden. So this is very much a conceptual project that throughout its life will be fleshed out, thought about, try different things to see how it can best work. But at the end of the day, its main goal is to streamline the passenger experience, whether you're driving, taking a bus, using multiple modes, into one streamlined account to make things easier. We applied for this grant under ATTAIN, which is a federal highways grant that stands for Advanced Transportation Technology and Innovation. It technically has two names. So there's ATTAIN, and then there's ATTIMD, which is the Transportation Technologies and Innovative Mobility Deployment. It doesn't really matter what you call it. I've always called it ATTAIN. We reference it as ATTAIN in our application. If you Google ATTAIN FHWA, all the same information comes up. But at its core, it provides competitive grants to deploy, install, and operate advanced technologies that improve many of the same goals we have established through our mobility wallet. And it really specializes in these types of conceptual projects where, we have these ideas, we have components of them working in different parts of the system, and now we're trying to come up with a way to pull that all together to create a more unified experience. I mentioned some of these so far, but our project is quite unique, and it's different than I think most of the other things that have been discussed here today. We are trying to create something that hasn't existed before. There are iterations of this. There are sort of cousins to this that exist in other metro areas across the country and certainly across the globe. But in true California fashion, we are unique. We need to do things differently. So we are truly trying to come up with these solutions throughout the process. And the ATTAIN grant itself was amenable to this type of thing. As I mentioned earlier, there are several other projects that are happening both at the state and at the local levels that are parallel and complementary efforts to this project. The Caltrans road charging strategy that Andrew's mentioned before, and then LA Metro has had for several years a separate mobility wallet specifically for low income transit riders that they continue to expand because it has been so successful. And so we're able to capitalize on their expertise and their success rate so far to basically try to scale that up to a more county-wide system that is for everyone to use. We've talked a lot today about the importance of partnerships and the importance of goal setting, making sure that we're in this for very specific reasons, why we want to do this, all of these things. And so I want to talk a little bit about when you're at that phase of, okay, we have an idea, we have a project, but we really need money and we don't know where to start. And so when you get to the phase of like, how do we get someone to pay for this? How do we find the funds? I want to spend some time focusing on that. Before I dive into this, I do want to preface it. Prior to my time at Caltrans, I worked at USDOT, where I evaluated both discretionary and formula grants. So from the grants perspective, I've done this from the DOT evaluator side and then the state DOT applicant side. So I'm hoping I can come up with some helpful tips and tricks that leave you all here with some useful information. These are just very high level, how you should be identifying the right opportunity. You need to make sure that the goal of your organization and your project aligns with that of the grant program and the broader organization at large. When you're applying to federal grants, those are pretty clear. But like I said, our project was unique, it was conceptual, and that's what Attain was meant to do. So we were able to very clearly align those two things and identify it as the correct funding opportunity because it was essentially created for this exact type of project. You're not always going to have that. Most of the time you won't. But you should focus on, okay, at a high level, what is this grant program trying to do with the projects it funds? Is our project doing something similar? And go from there. There should be at least one sort of, I'm calling it here a slam dunk, that you can lean on in your application. So you don't have to check all of the boxes. You don't have to, meet every single goal or every single requirement, but there should be one sort of core component to your project that aligns with what is in the grant program, that it aligns with what the priorities of the funding are, that you can really sort of put on a pedestal and continue to promote and lean on in your application. If you take away one thing from my presentation today, I want to really emphasize you do not need to reinvent the wheel when you're applying for grants. I'm going to go into what I mean by this in detail, but federal grant applications are very long. They are very bureaucratic. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of confusion, but it's confusing, but they will tell you exactly what you need to do. When I was at DOT, our response when everyone had a question about a grant program was, it's in the notice of funding, the NOFO. And that sounds kind of like a cop-out, like just go read this document. But the NOFO has quite literally every small piece of information you could ever need to know about the grant program. And it is official, it's in the Federal Register. So the NOFO should be your best friend no matter what you're doing. But this is kind of what I am talking about when I say do not reinvent the wheel, because in a large program like Attain, so we requested $8 million. In a large program like Attain, it can be really hard to know where to start and what to focus on and what to talk about. So in the NOFO, they tell you exactly what you need to talk about. And this is very, very helpful because this is the information they're asking for. This is the information they're going to evaluate you on. And so this is the information you should provide. So as you can see, they clearly laid out, okay, we want a volume 1 and a volume 2. And then here's the components of each of those volumes. So they wanted cover page, narrative, management structure, staffing, and resumes. So if you look to the right on this thing, this is a screenshot of the table of contents from our actual submitted and accepted grant application. We didn't include, there's a lot of other things we could have taken it in more creative directions, but this is what they wanted. We had 30 pages to provide it, and so we followed it to a T. This is very helpful, and you should use this to your benefit because you can easily sort of begin to get sidetracked. You want to talk about, this component that you think is so cool, but just give them what they're asking for. It will make both your job writing the application and their job evaluating the application much easier and improve your chances. Following on this table of contents, when I say the NOFO includes everything, I mean everything. So they specifically tell you when you do your project narrative section, these are the things you need to include in it. So again, this is exactly the type of information and content that we gave them. We were not trying to, it's really fun and exciting to do an elevator pitch to sell them on this grand idea. But they basically told us what they wanted in order to determine whether or not they were going to give us $8 million. And so we followed that along again to a T. It is the most straightforward. It is the easiest in a process that is often quite confusing and has a lot of steps. Any sort of guidance and any sort of clear direction is going to be immensely, immensely valuable. As someone who evaluated these grants on the other side in the past, I can tell you the difference between a well laid out application and one that they clearly just browse the NOFO is night and day. They don't have to be, these beautiful applications that you end up asking consultants to do. They don't have to be, a work of art. Ours was literally a Microsoft Word with the built-in headings, but they told us what to do, so we did it to a T, and it made their job as the evaluator a lot easier because they were able to very clearly say, this is what the project is, this is what it does, this is what it doesn't do, this is why it aligns with this grant, do we want to fund it, yes or no? And then to just hammer this point home one last time, because again, this is my sort of, this is what I'm preaching. To prove that it was not just Attain and this was not like a one-off thing, I quickly went to grants.gov. This is the current notice of funding for a safety grant from the Federal Railroad Administration. So different administration within DOT. And they end up including the exact same things that I have been talking about, right? These are the documents that we want from you. Okay, the first one is project narrative. So in your project narrative, this is exactly what you need to talk about. Okay, they want a cover page. On the cover page, this is the exact information you need to be giving us. So I can't stress enough how helpful this is for you as the applicant, especially for the smaller agencies out there who don't have a lot of time and resources. Every grant is going to have some sort of iteration of this. And this to me is one of the most important keys to success of being able to create an application that is compelling, that clearly identifies what your project is and what it's talking about, and makes it easier for you and makes you therefore more competitive for a lot of these large scale funding opportunities that are coming out of the Infrastructure Act. So that is my spiel today. I hope this information was useful. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I've done a number of DOT grants. If you have questions about the particulars of a specific program, again, I'm going to pull the DOT card and say read the NOFO. But tips, tricks, questions, things like that, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer.
Perfect, thank you. So right now I don't see any questions in the chat.
All right, it looks like we have a raised hand. Let's see, so I'm gonna unmute you, so you'll just have to do it on your end and just say your name and your agency and ask away.
County of San Mateo Planning and Building Department. And I really appreciate your clarity on sort of how we can best lay out our applications. I was curious if this is an aside, but I think one of the things that I've heard, at least at our agency, that's sort of held us back from applying for larger federal grants, it has been sort of the concern around long-term reporting and requirements. And this was sort of alluded to by the previous speaker. And I was just curious if you had any suggestions for resources that sort of describe what level of administrative effort might be associated with some of these grant opportunities, just so we can really understand prior to applying what the long-term capacity is needed at the agency level. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have two sort of responses to this. Don't take these as matter of fact. This is just in my experience, but a lot of programs, especially the larger ones, will spell it out in the NOFO because they come directly either through legislation from they are there's a lot of money at stake, there's a lot of eyes on them, and so they will lay out, at least at a high level, the reporting expectations. I will say, you know, once you kind of get in there and get in the nitty gritty, Federal Highways or FTA, FR, whoever the awarding agency is, that is allotting you this grant, they're there to help you. And if you have questions about what is required, what is being asked of you, they are there to, or they should be there to help you. Aside from this project, but there are other federal highways grants that my office here in Caltrans administers, and so there we are responsible for the reporting for Caltrans. And whenever we have questions, have issues, have delays, we just work directly with federal highways about what is required. So yes, it can be cumbersome and it can be tedious. Oftentimes there will be at least a high level sort of overview of what is going to be required to set your expectations. But I don't work at a small agency. I can't speak from experience. I wouldn't let the potentially intense reporting components of it be the barrier to what you're looking to do.
And I want to make a quick comment. One of our future webinar sessions will actually be all about what happens post-award. So definitely be on the lookout for that webinar invitation.
It also seems we have a couple questions in the chat. So we have one question that says, what was the last page you showed, last page of your slide? I just missed what you called it. You were looking at railroad administration?
Yeah, so I just went, this is just a safety grant that is currently in grants.gov for the Federal Railroad Administration. I don't remember what the full name of it is. I did this not to highlight the grant itself, but just to highlight that a lot of the things I had been talking about with Attain are consistent across all DOT grants. So it's from a different administration within DOT, but it follows the same format and basically gives you the exact same layout. I believe it's a safety related thing for Federal Railroad for, I believe, track work, but I can't give any more specifics on that.
Okay, perfect. And then our other question reads, the White House OMB recently announced changes to grant transparencies to reduce burdens and increase transparency. Do you have a sense of what this means in practice for applicants? And then there's a link right after.
No, I do not have a sense. That's the straightforward answer. I think many organizations are trying to make the grants process easier because it is very cumbersome for everyone involved. Not just cumbersome for the applicant, but cumbersome for DOT when they have to sit down and review it. Do I think any sort of change to that is going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. But I have noticed, at least since I have been doing this both at Caltrans and at DOT, DOT tends to take feedback from applicants and adjust the application process and the application requirements to address that. So if they know it's complicated. They know that it's pretty intense. There's reasons for that. There's things that they really can't change and you have to do. But I have seen year over year DOT make changes to specific programs and what they're asking of applicants based on feedback. So there's always room to be like, hey, we didn't get it, but we want to know more. Next year would be a lot more helpful if you could provide this information, or if we could only do this. And again, I don't want to get too into the post award because, as Vanessa said, there's going to be a whole session on it. But if you are denied or you do not win a DOT grant, at least for the large discretionary programs, you can request a debrief with staff from DOT, and they will go through this information in the specific context of your project.
Thank you. And it seems like those are all the questions in the chat for right now.
Okay, great. Again, you have my contact information, so if there is questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben. Your lessons learned were very, very helpful. And it's great to hear from someone who actually worked on the other side before. That's really great information. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen one last time. And now we are on our last agenda item, next steps and adjournment. Just a little refresher, today's meeting is part of a webinar series with 3 future sessions. And in our next Federal Grants 101 session, we will have speakers from the Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans local assistants who will teach us about federal grant requirements and resources available to you all. And we're hoping to do this in the next few months during the summertime. Then our 3rd session will take place in fall, and we will learn all about the very, very important benefit cost analysis. And finally, our last session in winter will be about what happens after getting an award, how Caltrans can assist you, and some successful applicants currently going through the process. For next steps, we will be uploading our presentation materials on our webinar website within the next week or so. I will also see if I'm able to send it out via email to you all, but hopefully I'll be able to. Then we will also be uploading the recording of this webinar. And lastly, we do not have the meeting dates for the future Federal Grants 101 webinar sessions locked in yet, but I would like to send you meeting invites to the future sessions once we have the meeting dates established. And there will be a survey after this meeting ends that should open up automatically on your end. And one of the questions is if you would like to receive invites to our upcoming 3 webinars in the series. But you're also more than welcome to reach out to me directly to let me know if you do not want to receive those invites. And before we leave, I wanted to provide a few resources until our next webinar session 2 will thoroughly cover resources. I listed here some web pages that house a lot of information relating to federal grants. And in addition to that, we also send out the IJA biweekly newsletter, which includes great information on active and upcoming notices of funding opportunities. I highly, highly recommend signing up for this. You can use your phone's camera to scan the QR code on the slide to sign up, and we will also post all of the links to everything in the chat box. And lastly, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And how are we doing on time?
We have 8 minutes.
Were there any last questions that came in?
There were some questions that we didn't get to during Andrew's slides. If Andrew would like to answer them. One of the first ones was, what is the IRA grant fund limit?
And I saw that Andrew posted a few things in the chat box. Maybe that was already answered. And he might have also stepped away.
Okay.
Is there anything else, or was that it?
Besides
Actually,
the IRA,
sorry. I just want to mention, I think Andrew did post a NOFO link, so everything should be mentioned in there as Ben just went over. All the information is always in the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Sorry, not using acronyms.
yeah, then all the questions should be answered.
Okay.
Oh, there's one in the chat that was sent right now. As a nonprofit, are there any grants you recommend we take a look at that we could take a lead on, or are most leads with a government agency?
So I can actually answer that. I would highly, highly recommend checking out the US DOT discretionary grants dashboard. Again, I think Julina just posted the link to that. And it will give you the option to specifically select what kind of entity you are and what kind of project you're trying to apply for. And it'll just spit out funding programs that will match your criteria. Highly recommend checking that out.
Perfect. And then this is more of a logistical question, but when will the materials be posted and shared?
So if I'm able to figure out that I can send out the PowerPoint via email, I'll do that immediately. If not, I need to get those materials remediated, and that may take a week, and we will post that on our website.
Vanessa, this is Gus. I just want to answer the nonprofit question that if you go to our website at the Office of Strategic Investment Planning, you look under state discretionary programs, there's a link to the state website for grants, and you could do a search for the types of grants you're interested. I think you may be able to filter it so it's like just for nonprofits, but take a look at it and I'll post it in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
And then there's another question that reads, as a city, are there public works and capital projects that we can apply for?
I'm going to repeat myself. I would highly recommend checking out the US DOT discretionary grants dashboard, which will have all of the information. You just put in what entity you are and what project you're applying for. If it's a capital project, just put that in and it'll spit out funding programs for you.
And those are all the ones I see in the chat.
Okay. Well, at this point, I'm going to stop the recording.